Welcome to Afra's Artifacts, where we do some archaeology of our own and dig into the queer side of Star Wars. I'm your host, Alia Morgaine, and it's so great to have you here. So, last week we talked about Saché and Yané together, talked about their wedding, their children. Well, this week we're going to move on to Saché only. So, she has so many amazing things going on. She is, as all the handmaidens are, is a powerhouse of a woman, and I'm excited to talk about her today. So, Saché is now a Naboo government representative. She's an elected official, which specifically she is a representative for Naboo within the Chamal sector. So, Naboo, the sector Naboo is in. And remember that she's the one who was scarred by torture during the occupation by the Trade Federation 10 years before this book. So she still has all those scars from the torture, and it still affects her to some degree. You know, of course it does. I wouldn't imagine that it would be easy to get over something that horrific. So, as the narrative said, the memories of that horrible experience haunted her only infrequently. Usually, she would have a nightmare, and then Yané would soothe her back to sleep, and that was all. Sometimes, if mention of the occupation took her off guard, her breath would catch in her chest, and she would remember the pain very clearly. So it does still affect her, not as often as it did years ago, but it still does. And then Rabe, one of the other handmaidens, even came up with a couple of ideas for makeup for Saché. So one was to create a cover-up that smoothed Saché's skin to an even tone, and the other kind of makeup, which Saché wore most often, was makeup that highlighted the stark difference between her pale skin and the raw redness of her scars. She'd earned them, and they'd hurt a lot, so she was going to use them. When she spoke tonight in the Naboo legislature, everyone would see her, and they would know. So I love that she takes a horrible thing and makes it a part of what makes her such a powerful person. I think that is extremely admirable. So, as I said in last week's video, some of their children were orphaned because of a mudslide. So 4 of them were orphaned because of a mudslide. And Saché, part of her work was stabilizing the mudslide and calculating full extent of damages. And so she's off taking care of all the logistics with the people affected by it, families that were affected by it, by losing family members. And at the same time, though, she is deeply invested in her own new children. She would frequently make calls to Yané and the children when she was not able to be at home on time, and just passed along her love to them. So she did call frequently when she wasn't able to be there. And one little tidbit, Dorme, another handmaiden, but a senatorial handmaiden for Padme, does send Saché a new non-binary assistant named Teppa. So we are going to be learning more about Teppa, about Zhur, in a future episode coming up very soon. So I'm really excited about Zhur. She is a really cool character. So there was this thing going on with an old piece of legislation that was brought up, and it leads to Saché's mission for the rest of the novel. So this legislation dates back to the time when Naboo expanded to uninhabited planets in the sector. Colonists signed a contract that remains binding to this day. Number 1, Naboo provided them with startup costs in the beginning, and the other side of the coin is that other Chamal sector planets would be called upon to supply Naboo in times of emergency. They would be legally obligated to give Naboo whatever it decided it needed. Saché didn't like this at all. So Saché believes in doing what is right. And that leads to her having to make some sort of compromise on this legislation because Naboo wasn't going to completely dump it, but she knew that the other people in the Chamel sector needed something better. So she says, we must reach out to the other planets and see if there is a way we can work together. We all have resources that other planets need, and there's no reason not to cooperate, but it should be done under the auspices of good government, not an outdated bill signed by our ancestors during desperate times. I'm here on Carlinus to ensure it never gets invoked. I don't mind telling you that I think it's abhorrent, and I would never vote to support it. Naboo is not self-sufficient, but there's no good reason to exploit another planet to cover our own weak spots in a crisis. My goal is to strike the bill entirely. And then it goes on because she realizes she can't strike it entirely. What I am here on Carlinus to do is work out a plan with you that I can take back to my government and present as a compromise. And as I said, she believes in what's right, not necessarily compromising to give a more well-off planet more benefit from this bill. But she does come up with a way to change the terms of the power flow in the agreement, such that the Queen, Governor, and Legislature must all agree on any future changes. And Harley Jaffin, remember her from a video on Sabe a while back. Harley says, and Harley is now, because she is the heiress of the Jaffin family, she is kind of rising in the ranks of importance on Jaffin. So Harley says, it means a lot that you would stake your reputation for us. We don't vote for you, and your people are the ones who might end up shorted. But Saché says, I like to think I am better at the long game. Love that. And lastly, we have that Yané did buy her a sofa to put in her office, and frequently she would sleep on the sofa in her office because she didn't have time to go home because there was too much to do. Lord, I'm glad I don't have a sofa in my office. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is a perspective from Palpatine, where he says, Representative Saché had reacted exactly as he'd expected, with her bleeding heart and her determined good nature. Of course, for me, those are awesome things. They're not bad things at all. But you know, Palpatine's evil, so makes sense. So comment down below on what you think about Saché's new life, what you think about how Saché has progressed from handmaiden to elected government official, and what you think about what her personality is like. Has it stayed the same? Has she changed a lot? I think a degree of both, but I still think regardless, she is a super powerful, awesome woman. So check out next week for an update on Yané, Saché's wife. And remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter at Alia Morgaine, and peruse my blog at thestarsreview.blogspot.com. May the Force be with you.